Hello and welcome, says the train, as do I. So, as someone referred to it in an email, there is this twilight zone as a child. This was a spooky, eerie, kind of supernatural science fiction late night TV show, black and white, long time ago. Or it's this no man's land, grey area between practice as lay people and practice as we will today refer to monks and nuns as monastics, because I'm going to have to refer to monastic life on more than a few occasions. The reference was in regards to a situation we often find ourselves in. Myself, for about 5 years, having taken up the practice, developed meditation, trying to keep sila as best I can, that is the 5 precepts of no killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying or taking of intoxicants, and developing wholesome mind states, reducing unwholesome mind states, primarily at first by learning and understanding, getting to know, not intellectual learning, study, but just getting to know the teachings of the Buddha, the Dharma, as in the words of the Buddha from the suttas, which are contained there mostly in the Sutta Pitaka, one of the 3 collections, the 3 books of the Tipitaka, the 3 baskets of the Buddha's teachings. The first is the Vinaya Pitaka, second the Sutta Pitaka, the third is the Abhidharma. The first is more in reference to or for monastics and leading the holy life as a monk or a nun, containing also therein the Patimokkha, the 227 rules of a monk and the 311 rules of a nun. A bhikkhu is a monk, a bhikkhuni a nun. And this grey area, this no man's land, this twilight zone, is when one is a lay person practicing on the 5 precepts and considering maybe ordination, but not always so. It may not be that your circumstances enable you to go off to join a monastery, renounce your worldly life, leave behind money, family, responsibilities in terms of work. It may not be possible, but you wish to still become free from suffering in this lifetime. You wish to still take upon yourself the training that the Buddha offers us in sila, moral virtue, samadhi, meditation, panya, the development of wisdom. You wish to continue this throughout your lay life with a view to attaining to enlightenment. And there is absolutely nothing to stop you from doing that. But what there is in lay life, one can say, on one hand, many distractions that prevent you from attaining even deep levels of meditation, because maybe you live in a busy environment, a busy household. Maybe you're not able to go off on meditation retreats, or you just have a lot of responsibilities in your mind, work and troubles and problems that go with samsara. Samsara is what we call this realm of existence that also monks and nuns are in. When one decides to renounce all that and go and join the monastery, by far are you running away from those responsibilities and the vicissitudes of lay life, but you indeed leave those behind to face a whole new array of issues before you. But firstly, your mind. Without the distraction of things we use to satisfy our need for sensual desire, so entertainment, nice tasty foods, perfumes, sensual pleasure, these kinds of things, being stripped to the bare, literally, with just one set of robes, put in a hut in a forest, you're exposed to the activities of your mind and all of its cravings. These too can be very intrusive on your meditation practice, and it is there the work really begins, the battle begins. So some are fortunate enough, or not so fortunate, as you may think, to be in a position to take such a drastic step, renounce worldly life, move into a monastery and face that, and then see how and if they are able to sustain their practice through all of the problems that arise as a result of what we call in the Pali word kilesas, our defilements, our root defilements of greed, hatred and delusion. It is these we are trying to eradicate, it is these we are trying to extinguish. However, rather than seeing it as such a broad difference, and there being this no man's land, this twilight zone, this grey area in between that of lay life and monastic life, we must see and listen to and understand what the Buddha showed us and what the Buddha has taught us, and put into practice that in order that we can for ourselves, whether as monastics or as lay people, experience for ourselves the fruits of the practice. And the Buddha did not restrict this just to monastics. In fact, to the contrary. There is the fourfold assembly I've spoken of probably many times before, but just to sum up again, and this is the monks and nuns, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, laymen and lay women, upasikas and upasikas. Same word, just an I changes for an A and an R. So bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasikas and upasikas, lay women, lay men, nuns, monks. 4. Without all 4, this fourfold assembly, if you think of 4 legs on a table, the table with one missing falls down, wobbles, is not a firm structure, will not support, hold anything stably. If we imagine the Buddhasasana, this Buddhist religion, as that tabletop, and the faith, so saddha is the Pali word for faith, the faith or confidence as it's often translated to in the modern world, the confidence in the Buddha's teachings, if it wasn't for that, the upasikas and upasikas may drift off and not follow the teachings of the Buddha. in which case the tabletop would rock. Similarly, if it wasn't for the fruition, the results that come from the practice as taught by the Buddha, then similarly maybe the nuns or the monks would wander off too and think, well, this isn't really working, and similarly this surface would not remain solid. However, it is evident by the very fact that it is still a very firm and solid sasana, Buddhist religion, still firmly supported and supporting laymen and laywomen, monks and nuns, as it is an interdependent relationship, still firmly 2,566 years after the Buddha's time. And why is this? Well, because firstly, we have one thing in common. In fact, we have many things in common, but the primary thing we have in common as lay people or as monastics is the faith in the teacher. Not as a god, not someone we pray to or we worship, although some do, and if that supports their faith, their confidence, that's okay. But if we see the Buddha as a teacher who is no longer with us, as he attained to his ultimate goal of freedom from rebirth into samsara, when we understand that and we have confidence in that teacher having demonstrated by his own example, which he passed down to his disciples whom formed the Sangha, which is still here today, these millennia later, behaving and living in accordance with the exact same Vinaya Pitaka, that first basket of Buddha's teachings, written down all that time ago, still there, strong, evident today, gives, if not proof, supreme confidence for people to continue following in that firm faith and understanding of what the Buddha religion is. So, when we find ourselves in this twilight zone, in this practicing arena of samsara, in lay life, what is there for us to do? What is there for us to do rather than, do we run away to the monastery to ordain as a monk or ordain as a nun? No, no, no. We can, if we are fortunate enough to live near a monastery, near a place of practice or a meditation center, certainly go to these places for retreats, which can be very beneficial for some, not all. We can visit monks and nuns in these places where they live and maybe practice generosity by offering them food and helping to support them with their very simple needs, very simple indeed. But more importantly, we can take refuge. And taking refuge, they call in the Pali this ceremony of Tisarana, is usually conjoined with Pancha Sila. So Tisarana is, this T is like T Pitaka, the three baskets. T Sadhana is triple refuge. The refuge in the triple gem. The triple gem being the three jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Now for you long-term Buddhists and old-timers to this channel who know all about that, don't get bored and turn off, because I'm just expanding upon this idea of taking refuge to show us where really we see this twilight zone, this grey area, this no man's land, as something of a barrier, an obstacle, demarcation. But this is just a perception which isn't really there. There is an ultimate hurdle to jump, going from lay life to monastic life in terms of ordination. Yes, but in terms of practice, we can practice as lay people to whatever degree suits our circumstances. Now, of course, a lot of the circumstances that influence our decisions and how we are able to practice what we can do are as a result of the causes we put in place ourselves. So if we choose to have a career pursuing material gain, working all of the hours that we have to better develop our financial resources, buy better cars, bigger cars, faster houses, it's all the wrong way round, go on nicer holidays, get the most expensive clothes, then that is the energy that we're expending in our career for that purpose. Now, of course, this is not going to materialize in an enlightenment. It's not going to materialize in awakening even to the basics of the Buddha's teachings, because all of your time is occupied in just the pursuit of financial gain. So this is a cause against the practice. But if we choose to, say, bring down our levels of income, and I'm just describing on the most simplest of levels here, because we all have much more complex lives than I can possibly go into individually. But there are within our lives, unless we are in a very deep in a family situation, very dependent on us, but even then, as I will talk of in a minute, there are opportunities for us to practice. But there are areas of our lives where we can find the time to practice, and we can perhaps maybe do without if we are fully occupied in the pursuit of materialistic gain. But only once we have seen the incentive, the appeal, the advantage in the practice. So taking refuge, T-sadhana and Panchasila. Panchasila is to just reaffirm the determination to keep those 5 precepts. And that is the foundation of all of what I talk about. It is the foundation of meditation. It is the foundation of wisdom. Without keeping those 5 precepts, whatever I say here will not work. Maybe it will a bit, but it doesn't come with a guarantee. It's like if you buy something with a guarantee and you break the little seals in the screws at the back, and in the olden days, I don't know whether it works like this now, but if you, as I had a tendency to do as a child, if I had a new little radio and it was guaranteed for a year, something like this, a warranty, if I decided to take it all to pieces and put it back together again myself and it didn't work, the guarantee was null and void. I'd taken the back off. Now, this is like not keeping the 5 precepts. Now, they might fix it, it might get going again, but there might be a charge. But it's not going. You will not get the results, see the benefits of the practice if you don't keep the 5 precepts. So we reaffirm those by this ceremony of Panchasila. Ceremony, you can just say them, reaffirm them to yourself. I refrain from killing. I refrain from stealing. I refrain from sexual misconduct. I refrain from lying. I refrain from taking of intoxicants. You can say, I make this determination to refrain. You can expand upon it if you like, or you can say it in Pali, or whatever language is appropriate. But before that, we take T-sadhana. T-sadhana being refuge in the Triple Gem, where we say Buddham saranam gacchami and Dhanam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, repeating it 3 times in each case. This is, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. Refuge being protection, refuge being security of shelter, a home, a place to live within the realms of the Buddha as the teacher, the Dharma, his teachings, and the Sangha, whom have continued to pass on those teachings in that very long lineage of monks and nuns, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, since the time of the Buddha, his disciples, when first ordained, went on to ordain from generation to generation to this day, 2,566 years later, us, bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, monks and nuns throughout the world in this modern era, still teaching, passing on to you the Dharma in the same way as has been in slightly different styles for many, many years. You take refuge in this because you have confidence in it working. If it didn't work, it wouldn't be here to this day in its exactly the same form. Even the way we look as monks is the same as it was then, the same design of robes. Even the way we go and collect our food. So in accordance with the Vinaya Pitaka, our monastic rules for monks and nuns, we live a certain way. And that is what you do if you choose to ordain. But without that, without taking that option, you can take this refuge. And it is a refuge indeed. And if you remember that by taking that refuge, that is similar to the refuge that monks and nuns whom have gone a step further by renouncing everything, even their name, so identity, to become an identityless member of the Sangha, part of what you're really taking refuge. But we also, as monks and nuns, are taking refuge in our teachers, the Sangha, and our brothers and sisters in the Dharma, our monastic family. We are all taking that same refuge. So there's no longer so much this grey area, this no man's land, or this twilight zone. And your practice can be based firmly and securely on that, as long as there are lay people, lay women, monks and nuns. Now, if monks and nuns had just gone to be practicing alone in caves, in solitary, with enough food to survive for some time and maybe growing some of their own food, if this was allowed by the Buddha, then of course that Buddha Sasana, this religion, that Sangha, this Sangha that's here still now, wouldn't be here now. It wouldn't be here now. Buddhism wouldn't be here, the Sangha wouldn't be here, because they would have just died in that generation. It would not have had any interaction with lay life. So this is why the Buddha very cleverly, in his infinite wisdom but mostly compassion, made these rules that we must go each day in this form to collect our food and not store food overnight, to eat our food, finish by noon and not eat any more, so that the next day we go again. And the lay people see that monks and nuns still are living the same way, surviving to this day on the teachings of the Buddha. And this they then see as something that is worth taking refuge in. This is something they can have confidence in. This is something that they have saddha, faith in their religion, this sasana, the Buddhist sasana. So, as lay folks, we take refuge in that Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. And this is Tisadana and Panchasila, 5 precepts. Your practice, the same. You're keeping 5 precepts, we're keeping 227, but most of the additional rules over and above 5 are supportive of those 5 precepts. Now, in lay life, it isn't practical to expand upon the 5 precepts all of the time, usually. However, as a lay person, I was fortunate to be considering ordination, so I gradually drifted towards it by slowly renouncing things to an extent whereby for some 5 years I could live on the 8 precepts as a lay person. So, when we take Tisadana, this is taking refuge in the Triple Gem, and Panchasila, we reaffirm 5 precepts. But you can also, and it isn't often done here, where I'm staying, they have a slightly different version, I'm learning. But in other countries, you can, on Uposatha days, for example, the full moon and new moon, the Buddhist holy day, lunar observance days, or indeed you could pick, if you're in the modern world, a day that you're not usually working. Whatever day that may be. Let's say, for example, it is Sunday. And every Sunday make yourself a determination that you want to expand a little bit on the precepts that you have taken, the 5 precepts that you are trying to keep. Even if you're not able to keep 5 precepts, don't let that stop you taking 8 precepts. Because when you take the additional 3 precepts, you are not taking on additional rules or commandments. There are some restrictions in your activities, but they are based on making your day, your life, more supportive to keeping those 3 precepts. So by occasionally taking the 8 precepts, you will assist yourself in keeping the 5 precepts for the rest of the time, which is why people do it either once or twice a month. And the Buddha did prescribe this as a very meritorious activity, but also very good for your practice, to at least once a month, and they do that here, I think, but in a slightly different form, take the 8 precepts. And this again, if you don't have access to monks and nuns, you can do yourself at home from your chanting book, read it aloud, or just quietly say it to yourself and expand upon the 5 precepts. What happens when you take the 8 precepts is you turn the 3rd precepts of refraining from sexual misconduct into celibacy, so there's no sexual activity whatsoever. In addition, there's number 6, which is you do not eat any food in the afternoon, thus freeing up your time for practice and your mind from thinking about the next meal that day in the afternoon. If you can just have one meal in the morning, that's great, but you may wish to have breakfast and then something later on in the morning just before 12 o'clock. But then food isn't a question of the mind or a concern of the body now until dawn the following day. That is if you've taken, say, the 8 precepts for just 24 hours. And then the 7th precept is you refrain from any beautification of yourself. You don't need to put your best clothes on. You don't need to put your makeup on or blow dry your hair or wear any jewelry. Simply wear your lounging around the house outfit, whatever that may be. Something very comfortable for practicing sitting meditation in, or doing your exercises however you choose to spend the day. And if you've got long hair, put it in a bun or something like this, or a ponytail. Just keep it all out the way. Get yourself nice and clean, have a nice bath and shower so you're fresh for the day, but no other adornments to make ourselves feel. If you need some moisturizer cream or something like that, this is all fine for the ladies, but you don't need to be putting on perfume. I don't know, whatever people put on, makeup things, and men, I'm not sure. But this is part of the renunciation, but it's also a way of just living with ourselves as we are and taking away from our minds this I must look nice for everybody else, or playing the dating game, as is really what it is. Like you see peacocks or birds or animals preening themselves before their potential partners, we're only doing the same with this activity. So this we leave alone. Included in that, in the 7th precept, it should be it's really 9 precepts, because in the 10 precepts, this is a separate precept. It's the 8th precept. So within the 7 precepts is no entertainment. So smartphones, switch them off. Now, if you have a downloaded Dharma talk to listen to, good, that's okay. and maybe a guided meditation, good, that's okay. But make sure it's downloaded so that you're not getting distracted by notifications to go elsewhere, or links to do this, or get into conversation, or making comments on the thing that you're listening to or watching. Perhaps something to just listen to rather than to watch, so you can sit with your eyes closed and just listen to the Dharma. If you don't fully understand it, don't start winding it back. Oh, I missed that point. Just let it go. Just absorb the sound of someone else's voice. That's hopefully someone who's speaking some wise words. Some of it, if only a little, will sink in. Because even if you do wind it back and go back 10 seconds and keep doing that, you're not going to remember it in a few days' time anyway. So just let it absorb naturally. Over time, you'll find listening to these Dharma talks, they're all the same. Sila, Samadhi, Panya, Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta. Four Noble Truths, Noble Eightfold Path. It's all it is, in different forms, in different styles, in different ways. Just let it absorb. But no entertainment, no music, no even chinky little nice sounding meditation music is not necessary. Just be with the sound as it is, even if the sound is not so pleasant. Maybe I have much noise, road noise, people getting the bus noise, outside my house, tuk-tuk noise, bread van noise, neighbour, I don't have immediate neighbours, but people nearby noise. This has become the background to my meditation practice. I hear it as sound, note it as sound, know it as sound, ears hearing sound, but have no opinion of it, no liking or disliking. Maybe I notice when it's absent in the early hours of the morning, it can be a little quieter, and I think, it's a little quieter. Maybe I can hear some birds now that I don't ordinarily hear. Note these things. Bring this day into your conscious awareness. Really expanding your conscious awareness into your surroundings. Now this, I do appreciate, might not be so easy in every household. But if you get into a habit of even doing this for some hours in one day a week, in a little space you can find in your home, away from everyone else. If you have even your bedroom is probably private, so you can maybe go and sit in there. But not, and here comes the 8th precept, we refrain from, it says sleeping in high beds, but it's better to use that more practically these days, because that was referring to luxurious, great big high beds, which we do have, people do have these days. But as you know, I just sleep on a concrete floor, on a grass mat, and most monks, this is how we should be sleeping, if not a little raised platform for the purposes of keeping you from the floor, maybe if it's a cold country or there are insects. But other than that, mattresses of thickness and comfort is against that 8th precept. But for our practices, or your practices as lay people, then one can just say, let's for today not sit on the sofa, and let's not sit on the bed, whichever room you've decided to spend your day practicing. And I'm not saying by any means you have to stay in the room all day, still do what you normally do, but more mindfully, without distracting yourself with your phone, with entertainment. And if there's noise, there's entertainment going on around you, just know it as such. It isn't your business, it isn't what you're dealing with today. You're not instructing it, it is just there. You're seeing light, hearing sounds, smelling smells, tasting tastes, feeling what you touch. And let that be your thinking, all of this activity of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Let that thinking be, am I reacting, am I not reacting, am I liking, am I disliking? Let that just be the extent of your investigation at this stage of the practice. And this, bear in mind, is just perhaps once a month, maybe twice a month, or one day of the weekend. And this, then, you sit on the floor for your meditation. Maybe if you need a cushion of some kind to raise your bottom, there are videos on here about how to sit and how to sit for a long time in different postures. So you can refer to those. I won't go into it now. But this is taking refuge in Arta, so T Sadhana Arta Sila, 8 precepts. And this, to some extent, can wipe out that grey area, because you're still in the twilight zone. As I said, for 5 years I was still in the twilight zone. But only because I had come to a stage in my practice whereby we experience what is called Nirodha. Nirodha is the Pali word for disenchantment. Disenchantment isn't a disliking, but such that you no longer hold so much attraction, joy, pleasure from the things you used to experience and actively look for in your life for sensual gratification. You see what you used to do as somewhat mundane and less fulfilling, and you begin to appreciate that the practice, just sitting doing nothing, meditating, is far more fulfilling, far more gratifying than anything you've done before. And this is what actually begins and develops this feeling of Nirodha, this disenchantment with our worldly activities and lay life. This is where we start to consider, and perhaps are able very much more easily to begin the process of renunciation, slowly but surely and gradually. This may lead towards, when you get to a certain stage with your practice, if causes and conditions mean that it is appropriate and you are able to do so, able to go off to a monastery and maybe at first try for a few days, then a few weeks, a few months. You may ordain, you may stay for a few years. You may not stick at it. The ordination process, it takes some time, but once you're ordained, then the work begins. Because rather than the distractions we have largely out of choice in lay life, our own choice, because of the causes and conditions we have put in place for them to be, we have many other things. We might find ourselves in a little wooden hut on stilts that are being eaten by termites into your room, creating holes in the floor where there are very many poisonous snakes, there are spiders, there are many jungle creatures that one has in these tropical climates that are new, if you're not coming from that part of the world, a new and perhaps for some quite frightening experience, and very much not within any scope of your control. After all, you have submitted yourself to living in nature in such an environment. But of course, not all monasteries are like that. There are much more comfortable environments. Monastic living can be, in the modern world, far more let's say civilized than that, with a little bit more comforts and securities, and also it may not be that you find yourself alone. Certainly for the first few years, probably 5 years or so, you're going to be with other monks. If you're a man, other nuns. If you're a lady, in their company, with their support, you supporting them supporting you. Much like the lay people and the lay are supporting the monastics. Monastics support each other, much like lay people, Kalyana Mita, noble friendships, they support each other too in their practice. But this is an interdependent relationship of these four what's the word? Forgotten the term. So the twilight zone. So after this, I was in this period of time for 5 years, and I remember Kalyana Mita, layperson friend of mine, and myself, we would go to meet in Southampton, in a city nearby, with the Buddhist Society, and the drive we would discuss exactly this. Well, what is there between being a monk and just being a lay person? And what I came to realize after many years is there's not really anything specifically there, because both the lay people and the monks are as important as each other. We need each other. Now, I wouldn't be here if people didn't feed me every day, clothe me, give me shelter, and more recently, medicine. It's very important. Without that, I have to go back to lay life. All monks, all nuns have to go back to lay life in order to provide those just 4 very basic necessities of life, what we require just to exist in the very simplest of forms. We would still have to somehow come by those. But because they are graciously offered each and every day in the form of dana, then that is how you as lay people, both now and historically, have supported the Sangha. How we support the lay people in return for that is by offering from this experience of ours, by whatever means, Dharma talks face to face, or now in this case by this medium, we share our experience of the practice with you, in order that in lay life you can still have a taste of how it is to become and be living in this monastic form as compared to the lay life. But each and every month or week or weekend, maybe if you can take a little bit of extra out of lay life or time out of lay life to take 8 precepts, you have refuge in the Triple Gem, the Buddha, the Dharma and Sangha to support you. Support keeping those 5 precepts the rest of the time further by just taking once in a while 8 precepts. I was checking no coconuts going to fall. This isn't coconuts, it's some other fruit, but equally if it falls on my head, I will be extinguished before your very eyes and there'll be nobody to push the next button to upload the video. In the event of this happening, I hope someone does. It will be a very good illustration of impermanence. However, on that note, I think there's a lot more to say on the subject, and it might continue. There are some specific questions, as I've noticed in questions and answers coming up, with this underlying theme, which is what drew me to come to talk about this today. And I've only just touched on the surface, because most people whom are experiencing Buddhism even for the first time, just newly entering this idea and exploring the practice of meditation, are in a little bit of a grey area. And if I can help you see that grey area as a little bit less grey, but a whole rainbow full of colours. It's not even black and white. It is certainly a great opportunity to practice. Now, I was saying, my friend and I, we used to have this discussion about whether there was a place in society for something in between. And I have seen, and there are still, organisations where there is a form of ordination, where there is a form of renunciation, and it is somewhere in between. But these come and go. What hasn't come and gone is this current arrangement. I remembered what it was, the fourfold assembly of laymen, laywomen, nuns and monks. So that fourfold assembly works, as has been proven over time. But when you can really bring the colour into this grey area of practice, of finding disenchantment in lay life, but not ready or able through circumstances to ordain, remember the practice can still result in freedom from suffering in this lifetime. It can still result in enlightenment, attainment to nibbana as a lay person. And many lay people historically have attained to nibbana. More so than monastics, because there, of course, it's a numbers thing. There are many more lay people trying. Obviously there's a small, monastics form a small percentage of lay people. So say there's 10 times more lay people practicing than there are monastics practicing. There's going to be a few more, historically. Now today it's perhaps a little bit more difficult with smartphones and the extra distractions, but not really. There's always been books, there's always been the mind, and it's the mind that is the distraction, our own thinking, our own kilesas, taking us out through the sense doors of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, trying to look for gratification. That is the distraction, not what we're holding in our hand. But if you can put those down once a month or once a week, it's much easier, it's much better. But with that, you can bring the colour into this grey area. You can really get your practice to have some fruit, come to fruition, and show you what you can see, you may have thought can only be experienced when taking that final step as ordained monks or nuns, by renouncing worldly life and becoming going and living in a monastery, becoming part of the Sangha. Now, don't let this put you off. If you're able to do that, then you can try it first. But you do have to go through, you can build your practice to a very, very good and sustained level in lay life, and then at ordination you might find you do have to go quite a little bit back, because the whole process of ordination, as you'll see in How to Become a Monk or Why I Became a Monk videos here on this channel, I'm saying that in case someone asks me, just go search that. You have to take a little step back a bit, because you're after all renouncing everything, even your ideas about the practice. So you may have a very good practice in lay life, and when you choose to ordain, wherever you ordain, they're going to say, now no, your practice now is looking after the monks. You're cleaning the toilets, you're cleaning the steps, you're sweeping around the Bodhi tree, you're washing robes, you're helping in the kitchen. This is your practice. Now this could go on for some years, as it did. And eventually you will be, once proven in that practice to yourself, not to anyone else. We care about our own practice, not others' practices. Our teachers will help us, but they too are practicing their own practice, and we can ask for the benefit of their experience and ask them questions, but they're not specifically keeping a focus on how we are advancing in our own practice, as none of us should be. We should be concentrating inwardly on our own personal development, rather than worrying about what's going on around us. And if when you're cleaning toilets, working in the kitchen or sweeping, there's aversion to that, you still have a long way to go. So this is why when you do ordain, it isn't running away, it's starting again. So you need time. You need some time, age. If you're late on in life with me, it can be quite it's a fine line between, this is why there are limits in the West to how old you can ordain. Because really you get to a certain age and you're not going to be maybe able to do such things. But the main thing is you can practice at home, either alone or with other Kalyanamitta, like-minded people in lay life, and see the benefits of that practice. So on that note, I will leave it. I hope there's something useful there for you. If not, just let it go. And thank you for watching. Be happy and stay well. I survived. Yes.